Okay, I've kicked off the recording. So yeah, welcome everybody to today's Sigstore office hours. The highlight we have for today is going to be an update on Sigstore Python and get a look at how things are progressing there. Do sign in to the agenda, and if you do have any items, please feel free to add them either in demos and discussion or any other business. We do have a section later as well for any intros or questions you want to ask. I'll open up the floor to that, so you don't necessarily need to write those out. But yeah, anything else, yeah, please feel free to add it in. And just before we jump into things, I do want to just highlight the calendar. We have this meeting today, and then the next one in 2 weeks will be on December 6th. So looking for any demos for that call. And then we're going to go on a little bit of a community break with regards to this meeting and certainly the community call. So the December 20th and January 3rd office hours will be cancelled. And the first office hours for 2023 will be January 17th, so we'll resume then. Okay, any questions or things to cover before we jump in? Okay, everybody looks happy. So I'll hand over to William Woodruff of Trail of Bits, who will give us the latest on Sigstore Python. So over to you, William.
Great, yeah. Yeah, so my plan is, I don't have slides or anything prepared. I'm just going to talk a bit through some of the changes that have happened recently on the Sigstore Python side. Yeah, so I guess for those of you who aren't familiar, Sigstore Python is the Python implementation of Sigstore. We're developing it in tandem with Cosine and the Java and Rust implementations. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen to show off some code. 1 second. Share a window. Yeah. So one of the cool things that I wanted to highlight is we've been working on a refactor of the core verification API in Sigstore Python. One of our goals for a 1.0 release is to provide a stable public Python API for people to import and do sign-in and verification operations without having to actually shell out to the CLI.
Can you blow up the font a little bit?
Oh, sure. That hopefully
better?
Yeah,
that's a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, so as part of this refactor, we've added this notion of like a policy into the API. And policies are essentially like the final component of a Sigstore verification. So on top of actually verifying the cryptographic integrity and authenticity of the signature and certificate, we also have the ability to verify the arbitrary claims and falsios. The falsio has added to the certificate in the form of X509 extensions. And these form like a little DSL that you can write in Python. So I just wanted to show off some of these. So for example, you can have like an OIDC issuer, which will correspond, of course, to the cert OIDC issuer flag. The GitHub workflow trigger, for example, to constrain it to a specific GitHub workflow that runs the workflow's name, et cetera, et cetera. But then we also have these like wrapper policies like any of and all of, which correspond to logical and or across multiple policies. So the idea here is that this will be, when we stabilize this and make it public, there'll be a very flexible API that people can use to write custom policies. And this will hopefully compose nicely with like the Q machine readable format that users will write and then we'll compile to this internally. Yeah, and then to give an example of actually what that looks like, we go over here. I talked a bit with UC, who I think some of you are familiar with, and we workshopped some ideas for like what this would actually look like. So here's an example, for example, if you might wrap the all of policy to include an identity, a GitHub workflow SHA, and a GitHub workflow repository into like a custom GitHub release policy. And then you would instantiate that and use that as your verification policy. But you could just as well write that as an all of explicit policy with identity, workflow SHA, and a repository. So it would be up to the user to decide how they want to write it, but we could provide some convenient aliases, for example, for some of these. Yeah, and then another big thing that I wanted to highlight, this is something that we haven't released yet, but with the coming 0.8 release for Sigstore Python, we will be discouraging, or rather disallowing, invocations of Sigstore Verify that do not include the cert identity and cert OIDC issuer flags. This dovetails with the work that Zach highlighted on Cosine, which is by default, Cosine's verification and Sigstore Python's verification is sort of insecure because it doesn't include constraints to the intended identity that you're verifying. So with the coming release, we will completely break that and ensure that users are always verifying against a concrete identity. And then later on, we will ensure they're verifying against an arbitrary policy, which by default will be a concrete email or URI identity. So yeah, those are the two biggest things. Like I said, it's the policy stuff, which I think will be is going to be a foundation for a really flexible API that will make public soon, and then also this discourage or disallowment of insecure by default CLI use. Apart from that, we also have a whole bunch of sort of background stuff that's been going on. For example, we now have support for arbitrary identities in verification. Previously, we only supported URIs and emails, but now we support, for example, SPIFFE or any other future identity strings that come in the X509 extension list. Yeah, so that was sort of a whirlwind tour. I'm happy to answer questions about any of that. Like I said, none of this has been in a release yet, but within the next couple of weeks, we hope to do a major breaking release that'll include all of this publicly. And of course, if you're one of the people who's interested in using Sigstore Python on the API side, I'd love to hear your feedback on this reflective API before we begin to stabilize it. So please reach out to me if you have any opinions about it or things that you'd like to see specifically. We'll try to accommodate them. And yeah, that's all I have.
All right, that's very cool. I have a million questions. I'm going to do them one at a time and give other folks the opportunity to interleave theirs. But I guess my first comment I want to make sure to say, this is super cool. I've been fantasizing about something similarly expressive. I have a draft of a library for Go that half implements something really similar, especially with the combinators in terms of, I didn't see thresholds explicitly, but you could have threshold, K of n thresholds. And then I was being overly clever and implemented all as n of n and any as 1 of n. But I guess my question is, what part of the policy do you think is amenable to this type of, what parts of verification are amenable to this? Because I at one point was like, oh, we can do the entirety of verification, including checking that it's signed by Fulcio and checking that it's signed by a TSA or whatever in this format. And then I started to back off and confine it just to the identity stuff. So like, how are you thinking about that question?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it as a relatively constrained problem. I don't want to make it too malleable, because I think if you make it too malleable, you run the risk of people parameterizing like the signature verification. And that's almost always wrong, or I think always wrong, not even almost. So I think right now the way we have it is the integrity and the authenticity of the certificate is always verified, no matter what. You can't work around that. And then, if you really wanted to, you could write an API. You could program it such that you would skip the policy verification, but you really have to go out of your way to do it. So basically equivalent to like the insecure mode for verification.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it makes total sense to at least start there, and then as other things, because my hunch is in the long run we're going to want to be able to express things like there are multiple Fulcio instances run by different organizations, and I want SCTs from 2 of 3 of them or something like that.
Got it. Yeah, that would be interesting to look into. I think. Yeah, I think as long as we write it in such a way that like the default is always secure, I'm totally happy with there being malleability there. It's just that, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Any other folks have comments or questions?
I'll go again. Do you have any thoughts on sort of extending policy of this sort to maybe like settings with more than one signature? So for instance, you might imagine wanting to express something like, I would like this artifact to be signed off on by 2 of these 3 people. And you can kind of implement that above the interface that you're exposing, but it requires you to do the bookkeeping of which identities have verified and which ones have not. So I guess the interface seems to be privileging, one validating one signature at a time. Have you given any thought to extending it to, groups of signatures?
Yes, yeah, this is something that I have thought about. So this is one of the things that I wanted to do as part of the initial, or as part of the full stable API for this. Is right now the fundamental input model for Sigstore Python is one input and one bundle of like verification materials. So one signature, one cert, one hash, and one potentially one offline record entry. I think longer term we probably want it to be one input and then a list of those verification materials, and then someone could describe, for example, like a threshold policy or yeah, any other sort of custom policy on top of multiple materials. I think I want to think a little bit more about like how we want to expose that, because the problem is that like whenever you have like lists in a command line interface, they get really ugly, and I don't want us to like degrade the happy path just because to be more correct at the API level.
Yeah, I think it's eminently reasonable to sort of bite off the smaller problem for now, because that, yeah, as you point out, is the happy path is probably the 80%, 90% use case. But it is fun to think about how you might. And I don't think anything you've done precludes that, but in the long run, I think we are going to want to.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. One thing that we did as part of this PR, I'll share a link to this comment. We broke apart like the actual data model for how verification is done in Sigstore, and so like we identified like the verification context versus materials versus policy, and so I think this is a pretty useful way of thinking about it. And so what we really want is like a one of n materials map, and that way, and then also a complex policy that can handle multiple materials at once. Yeah, and I want to think a bit more about like how that will look, but I do agree that's ultimately the end state we want.
Yeah, cool. We'll want to have that sort of experience and those opinions over in the protobuf specs repo as well. I think what you're hashing out is not unique to Python, and I would love for other language clients to benefit from that.
Yeah, definitely.
I had a question about the policies. So the plan is to make them extensible. Like, how are you thinking about discoverability?
Yeah. So I guess the idea I had in mind was that Sigstore Python would provide like a baseline set of combinators, like Zach said. So we'll have like any of and an all of, and then from there, the API for these is very simple. It's just an abstract class that has like a verified method that takes a certificate. And so, given those two combinators, you can pretty much do anything in Boolean logic. So we'll allow users to basically subclass or compose those classes.
Right.
And we'll basically like leverage API documentation to point people in the right direction, and we'll probably maybe provide like a recipe book for like really basic common policies.
Cool.
Yeah.
All sorts of fun things people can do.
Yeah, I think the really cool thing is it makes writing flexible policies really easy, and you can still make them secure by default because you can bake in like the identity verification. So even if you mess up the GitHub workflow, you're still verifying the right identity.
Yeah, I just to toot my own horn a little bit, and actually Marina's on this call, great too. So Marina and I co-wrote a blog post on basically this question of, how do you figure out what the verification policy is supposed to be for a particular artifact? Our sort of cop-out answer is that's not really Sigstore's job, right? That Sigstore is here to provide the building blocks for you to, once you have a policy to check it. And I think the interface William proposes does a really, really great job of exposing those building blocks. And the slightly less cop-out answer is we should provide support to folks and advice and guidance as they try to distribute those policies. So I think the answer to your question, Tracy, looks something like Sigstore Python will provide building blocks. Something like what's described in this blog post will actually provide the policies. So in the instance of using this for PyPI and pip, pip would hard code policies that are consistent with what pip wants to be checking. And so in controlled settings like a single package manager, this is a little bit easier. In sort of abstract settings like curl pipe to bash, but you want to check some signatures, things get infinitely more complicated. And so so I think we want to provide guidance here and enable individual tool authors to solve this problem once for their ecosystems.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'll check that out. But yeah, that sounds good. And presumably, I don't know much about policy controller, but these policies all work with policy controller.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the concepts will map. So I think the idea here is that what we'll do is we'll ingest like a queue formatted policy, and then in our API we'll build our policies out of the queue style policy. And so I think policy controller currently, I'm not too familiar with policy controller, but I assume it has a similar internal machinery where like it takes some input and maps it into its own internal representation. I think of everything as compilers, so I'm using the language of compilers, but basically you're going to map from some Boolean representation to another Boolean representation.
Yeah, and I think everything William said is totally right. One, I just dropped a link to a cool project that's associated with a paper that was published a couple weeks back about a similar question of how do you validate that a certificate is good in the context of WebPKI. And the approach that this lab took was to use Datalog, which is a logic programming language. Q is sort of a, I guess, theoretical descendant of Datalog family languages. And that's why you see Q proposed and Rego similarly proposed a lot for verification policies. So not necessarily advocating for this being the sort of lingua franca or the internal representation, as William was saying, but yeah, I think we are going to want to converge here, and I think being more expressive in the way that this new Python interface is a great step down that path, and over time we're going to see, I think, commonalities between Sigstore Python, Sigstore Go, all the other language clients, GitSign, policy controller, and then from there we're gonna be able to pull some of the verification stuff out and hold it in common. But I think for now, doing exactly what this interface does is a great first step.
Cool. Sounds good. Anyone have any questions, comments? Do feel free. Zach, you've got anything else you want to cover now?
You guys, can I have a completely off topic, so not related to the
Okay, yeah. Well,
so far
thanks,
discussed
William.
topics?
And yeah, that looks great. Look forward to it developing, coming out in a couple of weeks or so. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the first time when I'm joining this meeting, and I'm not sure that I'm in the right forum currently. I'm working for Nokia, and we are also moving to the container world, and decided that we will also sign our container images, and of course selected cosign to do that. And after that, we started the hard work, so testing how we will do that using our currently existing signing services and PKI infrastructure. So not using the Sigstore infrastructure, just cosign. And we faced with a lot of troubles.
Yeah, sorry to hear that, but I will say you are in exactly the right place. So yeah, please share whatever you can, and we can help troubleshoot here or follow up. So can you say a little bit
Okay,
more?
first I just wanted to clear if this is the correct forum. So probably next time, or I don't know, next week or 2 weeks from now, I can prepare with a presentation with all of the details.
Yeah, no, I think that's we
mhm.
welcome folks, and like you can see in some of the past ones, we've had folks do little overviews of the problem space and what they're trying to solve and the context in which they're doing it. And then we can get into discussions of the approach and any troubleshooting. And then, yeah, it's just really nice. Then people can jump in with suggestions or input.
Okay. If you like, I can summarize it, but I think it's better to prepare with a presentation and go into the details to explain what we are trying to do and what we cannot do with the current feature set that you're currently having.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and I can follow up if you're in Sigstore Slack. I can sync with you just to get you on the agenda and just answer any questions on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Then we'll prepare it in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, welcome, and
Thank you.
thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'd love to see the details, but if you want to just, no pressure if you would rather wait, but if you want to just express high level what you're running into, we may have some ideas.
Okay, just let me a minute. I'm having a presentation draft about it.
Okay, yeah, we can wait for the
Just need to find in my inbox. So
okay. Oh yeah. I'm happy to look at a draft. It doesn't have to be polished.
And maybe we'll just check in. Anybody else who wants to say hello or ask any questions, raise any topics, either for today or forward-looking ones for future?
I mean, I can say hello.
Perfect.
Since it's gone quiet. So I recently got Sigstore running on my laptop, like locally, thanks to Felix and his guide. He kind of did a blog post recently, and I got a Sigstore running locally on my Mac, running Docker kind, and yeah, I can like sign a container and verify it locally, just to understand like how Sigstore components work, with each other. I did try Luke's Sigstore the hard way, but it obviously needs Google Cloud. I did try it once, but I had to try it multiple times. So I'm just trying to save money and trying to do it locally in my laptop. So yeah, I would recommend to check out Felix's guide if you really want to run Sigstore locally on a laptop. Just straightforward stuff. I will post a link shortly.
Nice. Yeah, glad to hear you're having success with that. I know Felix is normally at these meetings, but it doesn't look like he's here today, so we'll send him the recording. Awesome. I'm going to add that to the notes.
And share your screen. Share just. Okay, I found the presentation, but I cannot share it.
Is that a permission thing? I think it should be open to anyone to share if they have access locally.
Mm-hmm. It's blocked by Firefox.
Anyone, any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think William was able to present no problem. Do you think? Sorry.
Oh, so if it's Mac OS, you usually have to restart the browser and go to accessibility settings and do the whole like song and dance. Yeah, if it's Linux, I'm not sure. It probably depends on whether it's Wayland or X11.
Yeah, so Sabat, totally up to you. We can try.
I cannot share.
How about this? Shall we leave it for today? And why don't I reach out to you and we can see if we can troubleshoot it offline, or not in this meeting, but
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, and then we can either follow up in Slack or wait till the next meeting and go through that presentation. Does that sound good?
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, but thank you very much for being so willing to jump in straight away. Okay, yeah, I'll reach out and we can try and troubleshoot that together.
What about now?
As soon as you amazing. Right.
Oh,
flow.
you can see now something, but that's not the correct window.
I see the cosine testing with Insta in PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. Then I just need to select the other PowerPoint.
Ah.
But I now at least learned that I cannot see the complete screen, just a single window. And I need to find the window from the list. Hello. This one.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
Amazing.
So what we would like to do, so we are having a registry. We are uploading the image in real time to the registry. Can you see also my cursor or just the window?
Yeah, we can see the cursor.
Great. And after that off cycle, we would like to generate the signature for it. So we are using cosine generate to generate the payload. We are calculating the SHA hash of the payload with OpenSSL, and we are sending the SHA hash to our signing backend, which is sending to an HSM. The HSM will generate a temporary public and private key pair, and we assign our hash with the private key and also generate a certificate for the public key and send it back to us to the Nokia server. And after that, we just like to upload that and attach that to the image. I mean the signature, the certificate, and the certificate chain. That's the use case that we want to follow. The first missing point what we faced is actually we cannot attach the certificate with cosine attach command. For that, we found a GitHub issue. Oh, you can see, but 2267, that's the number of the GitHub issue. That the attach command cannot attach the certificate. And that was the first issue, and we started to investigate how can we implement this feature. Theoretically, it should not be a hard work, but still not there. The next issue, then after that, we tried to use the cosine verify. And the cosine verify is expecting either a public key or a certificate as a command line argument to check the signature. And that's uploaded to the registry. So I don't know why the cosine verify cannot get the certificate from the registry and use a public key from the certificate to check the signature. Because if we are just using cosine sign, then it's having an option to upload also the certificate to the registry in cosine sign. But with cosine attach, we cannot attach the certificate. But we can manage to upload that, and after that, still the certificate is not really used in the registry. So we need to manually download the certificate and pass the cosine verified command. That was the second issue. And the third issue, we try to play with passing a certificate chain to cosine verify in the command line using the local certificate chain file. And in that case, we just realized that the last certificate in the chain is automatically accepted as a trusted certificate. And that's again, that's not sound very good. Because someone can create a fake certificate chain and ship it with our containers, and with cosine verify, the verification will pass. So I don't know if it was clear so far.
Yeah,
But
no,
what,
all clear so
what
far.
we are looking for on verification side, that we should be able to attach the certificate and the certificate chain and upload it to the OCI registry with the image. And when I'm doing the verification, I am having a pre-configured root certificate set. So Cosign automatically finds the certificate chain. It checks the first certificate in the chain if it's matching with the pre-configured root C. It doesn't matter if it's coming from command line or from the default setting of Linux. But it checks the first certificate and after that validates the whole chain and extracts the public key from the last, so the leave certificate, and using this public key to check the signature of the generated metadata, and of course after that checking the digest of the image or attestation, doesn't matter. That's the workflow what we wanted to create, but we feel that we are far from this currently.
Yeah, thanks. That's super helpful. I will say everything you want to do is something that we abstractly intend to support, but it has not been to this point sort of the most battle tested use case. So you're running into some rough edges. It's much easier if you're sort of fully bought into the Cosign infrastructure. But we do want to enable exactly this use case. So if you're willing to be a little bit patient, then I think all of the things you highlighted are should be doable and should be supported at some point. And of course, we do as a project want to provide all these things for you. If you are able to sort of get your hands dirty and contribute upstream, fixes for all these things would be awesome. But if you don't have that time or don't have the context to go into Cosign, if you wait a little while, they should be fixed. And knowing that folks are blocked on these things is going to be a strong signal to us that we should prioritize some of these issues. So I think overall, yeah, I didn't see any issues with what you described. We should be able to attach a certificate, just like you mentioned. We should be able to pull down the cert directly from the registry. I wanna make sure to push back a tiny bit on that and say we don't want to pull down a public key from the registry, right? Because you don't want to basically ask the image how to check the image, right? That's too easy. But if you have a certificate chain up to your root, then that's something we are going to want to support. I don't know if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah, it is clear, of course. I don't really want to upload a public key, just the certificate which contains a public key.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what I thought you were saying, but just wanted to double check. Yeah, and I think the reason that the certificate chain stuff winds up just trusting the last one, I think it's a bad default behavior. It's because the intention for that -- chain flag was slightly different. It was meant to provide basically a trust root and not a chain. So I want to rename that flag and then provide a different flag, which basically does what you would expect -- chain to do. So all these are things that I anticipate will be fixed in the 2.0 release or shortly after. But thank you for letting us know that these are blockers for you, and we can try to prioritize some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just a blocker for me or other kind of private companies on auto versus projects are not really able to use the public recore and Sigstore infrastructure. Because yeah, our softwares are developed in completely private networks, so in the customer side, we will not have any internet access to download certificates from public databases. So that's why we would like to ship the certificates with our container images, and also provide our root C to make that certificate verifiable.
Yeah, that makes all perfect sense. And again, the private use case is something we want to support. has had less attention given to it because sort of the open source setting has kind of been the default. And so the only way we can know what we're missing is when someone like yourself says, hey, we tried to use it and here's the issues we ran into. So again, we really appreciate that.
Okay, do I need to open any GitHub issues so I can see if there is any progress about it, or it's already on your roadmap?
Yeah, if you would like to file one for that middle bullet point about cosign grabbing the certificate from the registry on verify, and maybe stick in with it a link to 2267. Just it's sort of the opposite side of the same problem. If you want to file that issue, I will see it and I can follow up there.
Okay, I will try to do it. Yeah, but to be honest, that will be my first GitHub issue ever.
If you'd prefer, I can file this one, and then if you let me know your GitHub username, I can tag you in so that you get notifications if it ever gets fixed. Up to you. Let me know.
Okay, that sounds easier for me. Yeah.
Great. So if you're comfortable sharing it in the chat, go ahead and do that, or you can find me on Slack in the Sigstore Slack, or you can leave it in the notes doc, however you want to tell me that your GitHub handle.
Just let me find my Slack. Copy name. Display. Oh, that's it. I'm having the same name on Slack as here. Sigstore Slack cosign channel. I don't know if it's enough to find me.
I haven't been able to find it. I'm Googling, so.
I dropped the message to you.
Okay, I got you in Slack, so we'll follow up. We'll follow up there. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, no, glad we could get to that. But yeah, totally great. This whole meeting is designed to get feedback from end users and people using it in practice. So that's perfect. And now that you've highlighted that, we can take it back to the wider community and the community meeting as well, and try and help give that feedback and prioritize the issues accordingly. And yeah, thanks, Zach, for jumping with all of that. Okay, that's great. Anything else for today? Last chance. Okay, otherwise I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you very much. Next week, we would normally have a community meeting, but that's been cancelled. So December 6th will be the next office hours for the Sigstore community. But as always, you can find folks in Slack and follow up with things there. But thanks everybody for joining today. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.